thank you and welcome everyone to the March Florida Housing Finance Corporation.
I'm sorry, Angie Sellers is speaking right now.
Okay. I'm Angie Sellers, Chief Financial Officer, and I will turn it over to Ron Lieberman to begin the meeting.
Yes, thank you, Angie. On the line, we've got our Executive Director, Trey. Trey, you want to say a few words?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Trey Price, Executive Director of Florida Housing Finance Corporation. I'm calling you from outside of Tallahassee Memorial Hospital, where my wife gave birth to our third child, a daughter, on Wednesday morning. Thank you for all your notes of support and for everybody there running the meeting in yesterday's workshop. The baby was born via C-section and did have some complications breathing, so they put her in the NICU where she's been shortly after her birth Wednesday morning with some oxygen deficiency. Things are progressing very well, though, and she's now off oxygen but still in the NICU at this point. We're awaiting lab results and other things, other tests this morning, and we're hopeful that we'll be heading home this weekend to recuperate. Tara's in quite a bit of pain, as you can imagine, and is dealing with that. But she is up and able to move around and all that, and is nursing the baby, going down every 3 hours or so to nurse the baby in the NICU. So I am working on keeping the trains running on time in the hospital room and keeping her fed and able to do everything. So again, thank you for all of your support. I look forward to catching up with each of you about the board meeting. I think that Angie and the staff will do a great job. Again, I heard from a couple of board members and agree. Obviously went through the board package myself and approved everything. It's a fairly non-controversial package today. But if there are any issues, I know that Angie and the staff will be able to talk through those. I'll also was talking to the chairman early this morning. I'll listen on yesterday's workshop as we develop the agenda and items for the board retreat that will happen to be determined later this year in 2021, when we're all looking so much forward to traveling and getting out of our houses and to hotels and all of that. So even the hospital isn't a bad change for a couple of nights, although it's not exactly where we want to be. But thank you again for all of your support and understanding, and I look forward to catching up with you all. Obviously, the legislative session has started, and Stephanie will give an update on legislative session later in the agenda. She and I were over there meeting with legislators on Tuesday of this week, and we'll be trying to advance legislation well. And she'll give an update on the budget and where the legislature is on that. So I'm happy to answer any questions that any of you have, and I'm sorry for this meeting today. I missed one other board meeting a couple of years ago. I think Ray was the chairman. My wife had to go in for surgery as well. And I'm sorry to miss today's board meeting, but look forward to catching up with you all afterwards. Thanks, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Trey. And with that, we'll go ahead and call our meeting to order. Sheila, would you please call roll and determine a quorum, please?
Yes. Ron Lieberman.
Here.
Ray Dubuque.
Here.
Ryan Benson.
Here.
Sandra Einhorn. Here. Latasha Green-Cobb.
Present.
Bill Gullisberg.
Here.
Dev Motwani.
Here.
And Dane Eagle. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Welcome to the March 12, 2021 Florida Housing Finance Corporation board meeting. We have 6 board members and key Florida housing staff present here at Florida Housing. While the majority of attendees, including 2 board members, are participating via phone, we ask everybody, whether here or at Florida Housing or on the phone, to identify themselves each time before speaking and speak clearly and concisely without rushing. first is our public comment, and determine that any public comment will be on, agenda items only. So,
All right, Sanj, if you would please open up the line and see if anybody has comments they'd like to make.
Thank you. If you wish to ask a question, please key star then 1 on your telephone. If you then decide to withdraw your question, simply key star 2. All questions will be answered in the order received. To ask a question, please key star then 1 on your telephone. Thank you. There are no questions in queue. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanj.
thank you. Next is the approval of the minutes for January 22nd, 2020. And whoever makes that motion, I want to identify that we noticed this morning that Ray was on here as vice chairman instead of Latasha. So any motion needs to include that change.
Which I will then make after the fact.
I'll make a motion with that change.
Okay. Have a second. Have a motion and a second. Discussion.
I'm sorry, the motion was made by Sandra Einhorn and the second was made by Dev Motwani.
Thank you. We're off to a great start.
You're welcome. I'm going to try to remember to help out with that.
Okay. Discussion. Seeing none. Sheila, could you hold the board, please?
Ron Lieberman,
Yes.
Ray DeVue,
Yes.
Ryan Benson,
Yes.
Sandra Einhorn,
Yes.
Latasha Green-Cobb,
Yes.
Bill Gullifer,
Yes.
Dev Motwani,
Yes.
Dane Eagle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Florida Housing Finance Corporation status update. Angie.
This is Angie Sellers. Not much has changed at Florida. No, telling them. Not much has changed at Florida Housing since Trey's last update. We are still working mostly remotely with about 20% of the staff in the office, either some or all of the time. Like everyone else, we've had a few cases, but things still seem to be running quite smoothly. That is the update.
Okay. Legislative update. Stephanie Sutton.
This is Stephanie Sutton. I'm the External Affairs Director for Florida Housing. Just wanted to provide a brief legislative update. I thought I'd start with last fall after elections, we developed an introductory email to the legislature, all 160, and we attached a 2-minute video of who we are and what we do, and it's something that Valstar did for us last year, and it's really short, sweet, to the point, and I was pleasantly surprised by how many members actually watched the video, responded, open, no disrespect, sorry. Sometimes you get that out of office or the age response. Started with that, and then that led into some individual high-level overviews of corporations, individual members from both sides of the aisle, which was great. I was pleasantly surprised. And then we have also been working with the Governor's Office and DEO on our legislative budget request and our one legislative priority, which is to eliminate our need to go to the State Board of Administration, which is Governor and Cabinet, sitting as the FDA for our bonds. And we have Representative Rick Ross as the House sponsor, and it is House Bill 965, and Senator Ana Maria Rodriguez is our Senate sponsor, and it is Senate Bill 1160. The governor's budget recommendation is $423.3 million, 126.7 for the State Housing Trust Fund, and 296.6 for the Local Government Trust Fund. Trey and I have had a couple of meetings with members to try to shore up support for those trust funds. Of course, nobody's saying much of anything. There is a $225 million, I'm going to call it a sweep, but that money from last year that was vetoed will be taken. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that 423.3 will get funded, with the 225 going to general revenue. We are tracking about 37 bills that include both sides. So there's not a whole lot of activity yet, on any of the bills, and our bills have been assigned to committees but have not yet been heard. So we have met with both of our sponsors, and we're trying to get appointments with the first committees of reference and those chairmen and their staff. So it's a very different year for me. I'm very much a people person. I like to go, like I like to go talk to members because I like to go in their offices, visit with the AAs, meet with the members, and it's just a different ballgame. You can't even get into the Senate. Some folks are telling me they're meeting senators out on picnic benches. At least for the House, you can get in through security, and then an aide has to come down and escort you upstairs so that you're not wandering. So it's just a very different year. And that is my report.
Any questions for Angie?
Is there any,
Sandra Einhorn.
Sandra Einhorn has a question, sorry. Is there any opposition that you've heard thus far on the bill?
No.
Okay.
That's not. And State Florida did something similar last year, and we met with Ben Watkins, who's the Division of Bond Finance Director, and he was supportive of State Florida, he's supportive of us, so we thought this was timely, and we met with the cabinet offices as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next is the approval of the consent agenda. Angie, do we have anybody that pulled anything?
No, to my knowledge, we've had no board member requesting anything pulled, but one more time.
Okay.
I don't have anything to pull. This is Sandra Einhorn. I don't have anything to pull. I just have a question. A lot of consent, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday, but a lot of consent was Mr. Dubuque's favorite, asking for extensions this time because of COVID. And I agree with Ray. If it's coming back more than once, forget it. But given COVID and everything else, do you anticipate that going forward there's going to be many more people asking for extensions because of the COVID environment, whether it's challenges with underwriting or cost issues because of increase of cost? Like, is that something that you're anticipating? And is there anything that we could do before the board retreat to either change deadlines or do something to make it more compatible to the current environment?
Before you answer that, you have a motion and a second.
Discussion. Okay.
So moved.
That was Latasha Green.
Okay, go ahead.
So yes, and if you want to jump in, David, but I'll take this. Is Marissa Button, Director of Multifamily Development. So a lot of what happens with extensions are based on when the developments have been invited to underwriting. So right, we may have a couple meetings with nothing, and then you see an influx, and it's because of those time frames from the invitation and the acceptance. So I can't say for sure, that we're not going to continue to see COVID-related extension requests. I think that is something that we may see continued tail ends of. But what you're seeing usually is those big chunks of those competitive solicitations that were, then invited in and working through the same deadlines. We are tracking those, and we are able to track to your later question, like potential root cause analysis and things like that. Kevin Tater was our development finance director. We have a formula for everything. We have many things that we can look at to do some analysis. And so I think are, even after yesterday, talking through at the workshop some of the questions y'all had about extensions and timeframes, we'll be prepared to provide some information for you all at the upcoming retreat, not only about the concept overall of what the time frame looks like, but what we've seen related to COVID. And it's not even just time, but also cost escalation as well, of course, as you all know. I mean, there's just been so many we are tracking the basis for the requests as they come in.
Okay, and then last final sort of follow-up question. For those that don't need extensions, is there a way to find out sort of what's the difference between those that are able to get it done and those that aren't? Because again, once, fine, but since I've joined this board, if I see more than one extension, I'm not voting for it, because figure it out, get your act together. But I'd be interested to know what separates those that can get it done versus those that don't. I'm assuming they're motivated, so it's not like they're doing it on purpose. But how do we discern between who genuinely needs that extension or who's just dragging their feet because they didn't have their ducks lined up in a row, and then how can we leverage those that are getting it done and use that as sort of the model that we use to drive decisions.
I appreciate that question, and that's something that our takeaway was after the workshop yesterday, as well as looking at understanding the why, and those who can do it. I think you may have fellow board members that agree exactly with what you're saying. It's not just saying why is the extension happening, but what creates a successful developer getting through. And we can track that because we know locations, right? So those are all the things we see. These developments that were in Broward County, that so and so saying the permitting office is closed down for 3 weeks. Did everybody have the same issues? It is more nuanced than that, but we can look at that, and that is really the next evolution for us in terms of funding selection. In the competitive resources, is finding a way to then incentivize things being done quickly. And we know it's very clear this is a priority of the board. So we're looking forward to offering up both some, stakeholder communication about that for you all, but also if we can get some kind of framework for how we look at that as a measurement of what we fund going forward.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill Golford, I've got a question. If you want to take the vote and then I can ask questions, fine.
Yeah, hold on a second, Bill. Go ahead, Ray.
This is Ray Dubuque. And let me just emphasize, one of the reasons I'm concerned about this is what it does to getting the units online for people to move into. It's not to single out any developer. I think I've been accused of that, but I don't think I've ever singled out a developer. It's what can we do to get the units online? Just in those of you that know me, have been on the board a while, or staff know I'm big in statistics and spreadsheets, and I did a little spreadsheet on this consent agenda. There's 52% of the items on the consent agenda are delays and extensions, which equate to 1,879 units that we have at least delayed 6 months. Probably. Some of them are going to meet the thing, they're going to get it done early. In fact, I think there were 1 or 2 said, hey, we think it'll be ready by the April meeting, but we're not sure, so we're being safe. That's fine. But, all the way down, one had just 5 units, and I'm hard-pressed to believe that somebody couldn't get 5 units through some kind of board somewhere. And the biggest one was 200 units in Miami-Dade. So it's the gamut of the units. There's a lot of scattered in Monroe County. And that's one of our areas of concern. And so to have it being delayed, to me, we've got to find an answer to help get them on time. So that's kind of my big issue on the thing when you look at it. Thanks.
Question, Chairman.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I noticed that we waived.
Bill, excuse me, Bill Golford speaking.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I noticed we waived extension fees. Excuse my ignorance, but I'd like some kind of explanation of those fees, how significant they are. And is that the norm that when we give an extension, we waive the fees? Is that an opportunity in the future to leverage a little bit? I don't know, but can someone explain that?
Sure.
Yes. Hey, Bill, this is David Westcott, Director of Homeownership Programs. And I'm also have the CDBG-DR deals, which we are administering through a subrecipient agreement with the Department of Economic Opportunity. So the waiver of the fees is only for the CDBG-DR deal.
Okay.
Because we don't administer those funds, and the way that it's set up, really charging those fees and getting the fees from those deals, we would collect with one hand and then put it in the other hand and have to put it right back into the deal. So that's the way that those funds are set up, and it just didn't make sense to go through that and put Angie and her staff through that. So that's the reason, just for that source of funding, that we're recommending that you approve the waiver of those fees.
Okay, so there on everything else, there are no extension fees that are levied, correct?
That's correct, and we have no intention of waiving extension fees.
That was Marissa Button.
Marissa Button.
Yeah, okay.
Just a
Obviously.
question slash comment. Dane Eagle, question slash comment, and we're dealing with this at DEO as well. We've got a lot of, as you mentioned, CDBG funds, a lot of extensions. A lot of it is somewhat COVID related, maybe labor shortage, but we found that a lot of it's government permitting at the local level. We've actually got a bill right now that would expedite permitting. So just another thought as we continue through these discussions, and I know it's probably late to introduce legislation, but in general, as we're looking at local governments and if there's a way to expedite things, it might be worth that conversation. I don't know what the case is in these specific cases, but maybe it's worth diving into.
It is a significant portion of the justification for extensions is waiting for those local government approvals.
Okay, and I want to mention that also that I had talked to a couple of legislators and the governor's office about time after they have final approval to put units in service. And I called a couple of developers and talked with them, and they have big issues right now about getting materials and getting things done, and it's a huge issue. And as a builder, I know that's exactly what's happening. So later, after all of this, and when things settle down, we could look at that as well, trying to get things in service after they get their final credit approval. Anyways, so let's go ahead and vote. Sheila, would you pull the board, please?
Ron Lieberman,
Yes.
Ray Dubuque,
Yes.
Ryan Benson,
Yes.
Sandra Einhorn,
Yes.
Latasha Green Cobb,
Yes.
Bill Gulliver,
Yes.
Dev Mawani,
Yes.
Dane Eagle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll go to legal. Hugh Brown, please present legal item A.
Good morning, it's Hugh Brown, General Counsel. The only legal item we have before you this morning is a matter of Hermosa Arcadia versus Florida Housing, case number 2021-009 BP. This case arises out of RFA 2020-206, that's home program financing for small and rural developments. During scoring, the petitioner Hermosa Arcadia was found eligible for funding, but was ranked just below the funding range. They protested this result, challenging two higher-ranked applicants. After reviewing the application, the RFA, and the petition, all of the parties have agreed to add additional home dollars to the RFA sufficient to fully fund Hermosa Arcadia, in exchange for which they will withdraw their petition. This will not affect any other applicants. Staff recommendation is that you adopt the consent agreement and issue a final order accordingly.
Okay, need a motion?
This is Latasha Green Cobb, so moved.
Second.
Bill Gulliver, second.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Any discussion?
I just have a question.
Yes.
What were the results of the
That's Dev Mawani.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was just curious, what was the result of the recount, the rescoring?
There was no rescoring. They scored, they were eligible, but the amount of money that was in the RFA ran out just before they put them in the list. So we've added money to make sure that they get it.
Okay, I thought you said they challenged the scoring.
They did, but they dropped those challenges, or they will if we,
Okay, so that never occurred. We just found the money to fund that.
right. We did not go to hearing.
Correct, that's a part of the negotiated settlement, so we don't have the risk of losing those two.
Okay.
So they're not affected.
And
They'll
that
get
was
funded.
Thank you.
Okay, motion and second. Sheila, would you pull the board, please?
Ron Lieberman,
Yes.
Ray Dubuque,
Yes.
Ryan Benson,
Yes.
Sandra Einhorn,
Yes.
Latasha Green Cobb,
Yes.
Bill Gulliver,
Yes.
Dev Mawani,
Yes.
Dane Eagle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Marissa Button, please present multifamily program allocation A.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Marissa Button. Item A, our only RFA on the agenda today, RFA 2021-104. Excuse me, this is sale financing for farm worker and commercial fishing worker housing. We issued this RFA on December 14th, 2020, offering just over $5.1 million in sale funding for the construction or rehabilitation of farm worker or commercial fishing worker housing. So just goes back for your memories yesterday. That is the 5% from the sale appropriation from the last year. The deadline for applications was January 14th. We received one application in response to this RFA. Our review committee members were assigned, and they independently evaluated and reviewed their assigned portions of the application. And on March 3rd, the review committee met and publicly provided their scores for the application. And you have that the scores for the application in your materials. There's a link there to that. And in your materials, you also have the all applications chart that is Exhibit A, and that lists the application. The review committee considered a motion to approve the scoring results for the application, as well as a motion to recommend that you, the board, approve the scoring results and the recommendation that application be funded in Exhibit A. And those motions passed unanimously. So my recommendation is that you approve the review committee's recommendation for the scoring results and the funding for that application. Obviously, there is highly unlikely that there will be any notice to protest, considering there is just one application. So if that happens, we would proceed with the requirements that are legal requirements related to that. But ultimately, we would issue an invitation to credit underwriting for the successful application. We do have, as you see in your materials, an unallocated balance of sale funding, just over $830,000. The RFA says that remaining funding will be distributed as approved by the board. I am not making a staff recommendation to you at this point for the use of that funding. We are in the middle of litigation for the sale family elderly RFA, which is obviously a significant portion of funding. We also have 3 additional RFAs that are in process that we're accepting applications for the homeless population, for disabling conditions, as well as persons with special needs. So we have a lot going on with sale. I would not make a recommendation for that funding at this point to see how some additional things play out in the next couple meetings. That's my recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion to staff's recommendation?
Just Ray Dubuque, so moved.
Sandra Einhorn, second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Ray?
Yeah, I've got a question which just came to me, so it wasn't previously sent to you. But what my question is that a year or two ago, we were reallocating units that were being dedicated to farm workers and stuff because they couldn't get enough farm workers to take the units. Has anything changed? Now, it's a different county. That was in a much more rural county. But has anything changed with the need for this kind of facility?
Yes, so I'll Marissa Button, speaking, and Bill, if you need to jump in, please, do so. It came up a little bit yesterday in Ann Ray's presentation at the Schimberg Center. We've evolved this RFA to also serve a different type of farm worker, the unaccompanied farm worker population, which is growing, and so there's a different way in which we're looking at providing that opportunity for housing to meet that need. And so we've seen that data through the last the market needs study, and we've made the RFA available for both that type of housing, which now we have the one application for. You'll recall a few meetings ago, it was in 2020, whenever it was, we funded last time there was some rehab developments that were in our own portfolio, and that's another option. But they're still having to commit to the population that they're serving. So there is a nuance to the need, and we provide a couple ways for this RFA to address it.
Yes, Bill Aldinger, Director of Policy and Special Programs, and to kind of add to what Marissa was saying, also, as you know, that the market around farm worker and fishing workers have been changing as agriculture and those industries are changing. And one of the things that we have focused on recent requests for applications is providing more flexibility as to how those units are used, and kind of having them more integrated into the community than kind of being just separate, kind of close to the farm but not close to the community, and also that they're more toward permanent housing than, say, kind of other older models of farm worker housing, like the single room occupancy and the more the dorm style. So we've kind of been changing, with the industry also.
Sandra, a question?
Yeah, it was sort of a follow-up question. So Sandra Einhorn, this RFA, is it always under, what's the word I'm looking for? Undersubscribed, yes. Is it always undersubscribed? And if it continues to be undersubscribed, is there another way for us to meet this need without a separate RFA?
So this is Marissa Button speaking. It has historically, in my time with multifamily, we've had fewer than 5 applications typically. I think it's
in a year or altogether?
A year per RFA.
Okay.
So that is a fair question though. I mean, there's been years where we have not received applications, and what happens is that goes into the larger pot. The past few years we have received 1 to 2 to 3 applications per RFA cycle. I think we can consider perhaps the opportunity for shoring that into a separate RFA, but a distinct portion of this RFA is that it's serving a specific demographic, and we require narrative scoring to explain exactly how they're going to be tailoring that need and to the population. And so it is a nuanced scoring to make sure that we're not, doing a general occupancy, so to speak. So I don't know if you have anything to add with that, Bill, but that is a distinctive component of why we separate it out as well.
Is there a way to combine some of the other undersubscribed RFAs and make it a larger umbrella that includes different populations in anticipation of, within the scoring narrative, addressing that specific population the way that for the large county RFAs, Broward gets two deal, guaranteed. So is there a way to combine all of them to have one larger pot of money, make the umbrella bigger, but then still have those individual elderly, farm worker, whatever the case may be? Or would that be more complicated?
It would certainly be, Bill, do you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to add, not to say that it would be impossible, but, we have found, especially with going from the universal application cycle, back in the early 2010s to the request for application process where we're able to kind of customize the RFAs, we find even as we try to have certain demographics or intent in one RFA, it sometimes becomes very difficult to administer that, right, if that's fair to say.
Which is what we've seen.
I would agree with that, Bill. This is Marissa speaking.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do you have something?
No, it's fine.
Okay, Sheila, would you poll the board, please?
Ron Lieberman,
Yes.
Ray Dubuque,
Yes.
Brian Benson,
Yes.
Sandra Einhorn,
Yes.
Latasha Green Cobb,
Yes.
Bill Bellifer,
Yes.
Dev Mawani,
Yes.
Dane Eagle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Marissa Button, please present multifamily program item 2.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Item B.
This is Marissa Button again. Item B, our 2021 rule development. So we had 2 rule development workshops, one on February 2nd, 2021, one on March 2nd, 2021. And these were for Rule Chapter 6748, which govern our competitive programs, and Chapter 6721, our non-competitive programs. So I touched on those a little bit yesterday. And you've received all of the extensive information in your packages. But as a result of the workshops, we have drafted proposed revisions to the existing rules that govern various components of the multifamily programs. So we'd like to proceed with the rule development process for the rules, and we're requesting your approval of the proposed rules and the qualified allocation plan, the QAP. You have in your materials the formal notice of proposed rule for those rule chapters, and Exhibit B, and for 6721, and Exhibit C for 6748, and Exhibit D is the proposed QAP. If you approve the proposed rules, those NOPRs, notice of proposed rulemaking, will be published in the March 16th edition of the Florida Administrative Register, and then that will announce a formal rule hearing on April 7th, 2021. In years past, just to give you an idea, we've gone through such extensive workshopping. Once we have the rule hearings, usually there's no participation because the public understands and knows what we're moving forward with. But following review of the public comments, if any, that we get at the rule hearings, we would either decide if we need to modify the rules, come back to you potentially with a notice of change to incorporate potential modifications, or we would, if there's no changes needed, we would file the proposed rules for adoption. So there's a couple different things that could happen after this point. So our recommendation to you today, and I'm going to give you the recommendation, then I'm going to call some specific things to your attention that I think it's just good publicly that you all discuss. But our recommendation is for you to approve the proposed rules in QAP and authorize our staff to file the rules for adoption if a notice of change isn't required. If we think a notice of change is required, we'd ask you to authorize the board chair to determine whether or not that notice of change makes a material, substantive enough change that it would require full board approval, or whether it's something non-substantive that the board chair could proceed with approval for. And so that is what the recommendation is. A couple items, because you've got a ton of information there, and we did provide you an outline of a highlight of what's changed. But one thing, is that it's relevant because it involves a delegation of what you have authority to do now to staff, is allowing for staff approval of subcontractor limitations that exceed the rule limitations. So many of you who have sat on the board for a while see periodically packages where there's a significant number of items requesting the approval for an applicant to exceed the 20% limitation in rule that the development not be that there's no subcontracting to any entity or group of entities that have common ownership or affiliates of subcontractors. So we call that the 20% rule. And the reason we're asking you we've considered this, and it becomes, we recognize and have received stakeholder feedback that can really bump up against scheduling issues for development sometimes. So the board meets every 6 weeks. The applicant understands, for the most part, they usually do understand the requirements of the rule, but as the development moves forward, sometimes you're getting to that a few percentage points above, and we've worked with that and made exceptions for concrete shell contracting or buildings that are above 5 stories. So we have all these sub-exceptions where we find it reasonable to get, when it goes above that 20%, have another threshold. But ultimately, we think that it would, we feel comfortable that we would still be getting an underwriting analysis of that, whether it's reasonable or not, and that staff can always bring it to your attention if we think this is really crossing the line. If a development has a super sub that's over 50% and there's some kind of affiliation, like we can go through that and bring that to you as well. So, and the developer would always have the opportunity to ask the waiver of the board approval and come to you if they don't like the corporation's answer to. So there's some safeguards there, but I wanted to bring it up because it would be a delegation of authority to staff. And we can always offer to you the information items if we do those approvals in subsequent board packets, so you can see and have a comfort level with what the staff is approving as well. But we think ultimately we like the flexibility that it provides as well for things to continue to move forward. And so that's my note on that piece. The other item to bring to your attention is something I mentioned yesterday in the workshop, which is related to the QAP. Historically, for the past few years, we have set aside a percentage of the 9% competitive housing credit specifically for preservation, and that's as I said before, capital P preservation defined as developments over a certain number of years old that have HUD financing in some way or USDA financing on them. And we've gone through, and Ann mentioned in her comments, and Ray as well, that has been a policy of the corporation, and it serves well to preserve a number of those units. We got some public comment about that set aside, and the idea that with the adjustment in opportunities for financing related to the fixed 4% credit, which is a different funding source, a different housing credit that has some more equity associated with it now, that there may be an opportunity for those developments to get funded reasonably through that method, which is certainly interesting, and we have yet to see whether that's the case or not. We've also had, comments recently regarding the priority of our own portfolio preservation. That's not as we define preservation in rule, but it's something that certainly has been an objective of the board. And then the concept of preserving, the developments that have federal subsidy on them that need to be preserved per se, but really it's not potentially appropriate for rehabilitation of those developments, and it's potentially more appropriate for the developments to have a redevelopment as opposed to a rehab. So there's a lot of components about how we're thinking and looking about preservation that you as a board are also, this is your stamp to decide how you want to look forward as well. So in no way, all that is to say, my explanation, and which Trey went over at the most recent rule development workshop as well, is that preservation, as we had traditionally looked at, is certainly still a priority, we believe, of the corporation, and it's something that, we don't want to give up. Moving, not committing that full 15% of credit and allowing it overall just to be a use of the 9% credit allows us to do some deeper dive in terms of data. What is the stock out there right now, assisted housing stock? What kind of recommendations do we have for you? Looking at financial modeling, does the 4% credit really get at what is, the public comments coming in are talking about? Can that be served another way? This, allows us to acknowledge, yes, preservation is certainly important, but we're going to look further how we recommend to you to use this resource or any other resources to address the issue. And so I just thank you for your indulgence to explain that, but there's certainly a lot of feelings about it out there in the stakeholder community, and I wanted it to be really clear. We still have the opportunity to do a preservation RFA, even though the changes are made. We still have the opportunity to potentially add it as a goal in other existing RFAs. So there's a lot of options, and that's why we're making that recommendation. So with that, I will leave the recommendation as it stands.
I still think we need a motion, Bill. Yes. I forgot.
Sandra Einhorn, I'll make a motion to approve the 2021 rule development.
Have a second?
Natasha Green Cobb, second.
Okay, discussion. Ray.
The 20% on the subcontractor, I know that's been an issue, and I think that 20% has been too low for probably a couple of years with some of the things I've seen. My question is, and I might have missed it in the 400 pages or how many it was you sent, are you recommending an open amount for staff to approve, or is there a limit like 30% or 35% or?
No, what we are recommending is maintaining the percentage limitation. So overall, it is the 20%. That's still what the draft rule says, and then the 25% for when we're talking about shell, and we go up to 31%, because we've done all the analysis over the years of when applications come in and they exceed, how much do they exceed by, and so those percentage numbers will remain the same. It's just exchanging in the language of the rule, approved by the board to approved by the corporation. And that's essentially, and then what we would do is it still has the requirement that we have an analysis from the underwriter as to, the reasonableness of that exceeding the limitation.
Well, that's good, because the concern I have is this could get out of hand. We could get into some issues where some developers might not do anything shady, but just forget, because I think most of these where we go in and authorize the extension of overage of 20% are found after the fact, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, and it's something that can probably slip by. I do think that 20% is probably low in today's environment, but, okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Steph Maswani, what is the order of magnitude for the excess usually over 20%?
In terms of like what percentage points are we looking at that when folks are
in the backup, I know there's a couple items, it was like 21, 22%.
Yeah.
After the fact. Is that the usual?
Yes, generally that is usually, and what I can say is historically that it had been in concrete shell, it was sometimes going up to 25%, and in the keys you were going up to 30%. So that's where we started having these subcomponents come out. So usually it is specific percentage points, and sometimes it's just inherently related to the work that has to be done in the type of development that it is.
Yeah, and I'm just was just curious on that. And then second question is that I don't know the history of that 20%. Is it tied at all to like good practice and risk management, or is it all tied at all within sort of any sort of bond financing out there?
I would characterize it, this is Marissa Button, I would characterize it as tied to good risk management and making sure that there's the delineation. There's nothing about this requirement that is it's associated with our federal or state resource requirements, other than that we're, you know, being good stewards of the dollars.
And experience.
Yes.
We had one or two, not very many, but we had one or two issues in the past.
Kind of just the reason I was asking the question about the order of magnitude is I'm all for streamlining the process and the time, especially if it's a small order of magnitude. It doesn't really change the risk profile, but if it's something significant and it does, you know, I think the board probably want to certainly be made aware of it, and maybe I'm curious as more staff a certain leeway, but then for extreme scenarios we're made aware of it so that we understand if we're creating that's an excess situation.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, just do you think that the authorized staff will make it easier for a developer to do it and not get caught?
No, because I would ultimately be the ultimate authorization at that point. And I think what would be really good, and I would recommend doing for you all, is providing in the info items to the board agenda just the quick outline of when that has happened and the amount of threshold, so you can see it. I think it's you know, if there's any process, I think where we're delegating board authority to something that staff, you want to see where that ends up and how that evolves, and then we take the feedback of this seems, you know, out of line, and also if there is the potential that you're going to see it anyway, because if we say this isn't reasonable, you know, we get an analysis where it just seems like that there's something going on that's not appropriate, you know, they're going to have to ultimately have that rule waived, and you're going to hear it or see it anyway. So there is still that limitation is there, and if the board doesn't agree with it, so the staff doesn't agree with it, they're going to be coming and asking you ultimately anyway.
Are you suggesting a change to the motion?
I don't think
I can't hear the question. Ron, could you ask that again?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Ron Lieberman. I'm trying to find out if Marissa Button is making a change to the motion in the second.
I'm not making a change, but perhaps the motion could reflect the request that staff provide an update in future information items. That's for the board.
I would assume that would be expected.
This is Hugh Brown. We already do those for a couple of things that staff delegated, so it's pretty standard.
That would be expected, absolutely.
And no change. Okay. And I would mention as is a general contractor. 6-week waiting time for board meeting sometimes would definitely delay a project. So I think it's a good thing. Okay, I have a motion and a second, and Sheila, would you poll the board, please?
Ron Lieberman,
Yes.
Ray Dubuque,
Yes.
Ryan Benson,
Yes.
Sandra Einhorn,
Yes.
Latasha Green Cobb,
Yes.
Bill Bellifer,
Yes.
Deb McClawny,
Yes.
Jane Eagle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Marissa, item C.
Okay, this is the modified workforce housing allocation for 2020-2021 funding cycle. So I'm just gonna give the background. As after last legislative session, there was the enactment of the Community Workforce Housing Loan Program. That program, we recommended at the time of the July board meeting that staff issue an RFA through that program, similar to how we've done previous RFAs for sale workforce appropriation. And we also recommended that we look at that statute to explore new ways to deliver workforce housing units. And the board you all approved that in the July meeting, the $15 million to be set aside, and that was with the global timeline of resources that you all approved. And as we delved into the statutory language more, we realized that the component in that language limiting the loan term to 15 years did not allow the resource to be functionally paired with the low-income housing tax credit, and that gap financing is important in any significant, new construction development that we're recommending. So once we realized that, as we delved in, we came back to you in October and said, we really still want to do and need to do a workforce RFA, particularly because we have funding set aside for the keys we need to get out. So let us move the $12 million into that workforce RFA, really through the sale program, and the $3 million we will set aside and to explore, as I said before, other manners of potentially looking at delivering units. And one of those components that we started thinking about is perhaps a unit buy down program. And so what we said to you at the time was, before we do anything with that community workforce loan program that's something unique, we'd be coming back, we'd workshop, we'd come back to you, we'd tell you, here's what the recommendation is. And another thing I want to make sure I reflect is that that funding from the $15 million that we originally you approved came from the overall state housing trust fund dollars. The program was not funded by the legislature specifically, so that's important to your analysis of all of this. So we said, hey, the legislature has done this. The board, let's get creative and look at how we can achieve something. And so then like I said, we had to come back and say, oh, we can't really use this for the typical RFA, and we reserved the $3 million. But we had a workshop on that community workforce housing loan program on February 10th, and really trying to understand and think of a way to develop this buy down concept and what that would mean. And the idea behind it is there a way for, as market rate developments are coming online, that there's a financing structure where we can buy down a certain percentage of those units and have those committed to 80% and below AMI. So that's a lot to think through, and we put out some requests for public feedback through that workshop as well. And it's exciting. There is interest, but we realize we still need to do a lot more digging. And in the meantime, we have the $3 million sitting aside, which essentially anyone who's interested in potentially participating have said you can't do anything with that amount of money. And so what we know is we're coming into the next session. We're going to be seeing what happens with appropriations generally. And right now we're on the cusp of issuing a workforce RFA. And so we think this $3 million that had been set aside is better used to be able to do some more funding in the workforce RFA, and particularly in Monroe County, because we have that 5% high priority of the housing credits set aside that you all did there. So this request is asking, you to approve the redirection of that that $3 million that you set aside back in October to be put into the workforce RFA. And if you all agree, we'll proceed with, that RFA has been workshopped and we delayed issuing it until we could come to you and make this request and we get it issued next week. Thank you.
We have a motion to staff recommendation.
Deb Moswani, so moved.
Second.
Ray Dubuque, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Sheila, would you poll the board, please?
Ron Lieberman,
Yes.
Ray Dubuque,
Yes.
Brian Benson,
Yes.
Sandra Einhorn,
Yes.
Latasha Green Cobb,
Yes.
Bill Gulliford,
Yes.
Deb Moswani,
Yes.
Dane Eagle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, board.
Now you don't have to talk for a while.
You're welcome.
Bill Holdinger, professional service selection.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is Bill Aldinger, Director of Policy and Special Programs. This item A under professional services selection, is a request to authorize a competitive solicitation to continue and expand the Housing Stability for Homeless School Children program through a request for qualifications process. As we discussed and mentioned yesterday at the board workshop, the staff used the current strategic plan that was adopted by the board back in January 2020 to really help as a guiding document for, you know, our work in the area of policy, program, business operations, and the Housing Stability for Homeless School Children initiative was part of priority 3 of the plan, which is to enhance opportunities for special needs and homeless households to access rental housing with supportive services. And one of the specific strategies under that priority was the direction that efforts such as the Homeless School Children pilot in rural and small communities that evaluate and address the housing-related needs of homeless households with school-aged children to continue, so that we may continue to work on helping and developing best practices to facilitate housing stability for those households, to continue the children's education in the manner that any child has the opportunity to take advantage of, and also to increase the greater self-sufficiency for that family to remain stably housed and hopefully be able to improve their lives. So with that direction, in May of 2020, staff took the efforts to replicate the best practices learned from the homeless school children pilots in Santa Rosa and Hernando counties and formalized the pilot into the Housing Stability for Homeless Children initiative, kind of making it a more formal program for Florida Housing. This resulted in staff developing and issuing, with board approval, a competitive solicitation, which was a request for qualifications to select respondents from counties with populations up to $400,000 to receive up to $500,000 in federal home funds to be used as short-term tenant-based rental assistance, which is under the federal home program, that is up to 24 months. And as we all know, just providing the rental assistance isn't going to solve the problem. We use the rental assistance as a way to incentivize local communities and key partners within the local communities, such as the school district, the homeless continuum of care organizations, the public housing agency, and the case management agency, that once those families are housed, to provide intensive support and services, again, to assist those families to gain permanent housing stability and then be able to hopefully not fall back into homelessness after the short-term program is finished. And as I said, the RFQ, the terms of it require that there's a formal partnership, that of those key partners, that there has to be a memorandum of understanding established, that they send in along with their application, so we know that they will be meeting those commitments to assist the family. So once we went through the RFQ process in August of 2020, the board approved the selection committee's recommendations to bring on Alachua Bay and Charlotte counties as the three newest counties, making the total as of last fall, 5 counties. I can say that very quickly after the board approved the 3 additional counties, staff worked very closely with them to kind of fully develop the process and implement the process. And within a month or two, all 3 counties have had their programs up and running. So staff feel comfortable, and that the counties so far, the 5 active counties, are performing successfully even within the tough terms of what's happening around the pandemic that we would like. We think it's time that we could, with board approval, develop and issue another RFQ, or request for application, that follows the same terms and parameters as the last RFQ, and we would be looking to fund up to 3 new counties with populations of up to 500,000. With up to 400,000 persons, and that they would receive up to $500,000 in federal home funding for tenant-based rental assistance. And again, I think, as I spoke previously to the board, one of the reasons why we're kind of doing this in incremental phases is because there's kind of a lot of work around, both with staff and working with the local communities and the stakeholders, to make sure that everything is in place and everybody has their role and responsibilities, and the process works smoothly, as well as to allow us to work through any kinks. So that's kind of why we have been requesting to kind of only implement this, incrementally and not kind of overdo it. Staff recommends that the board authorize Florida Housing to issue a new competitive solicitation to expand the Housing Stability School Children Initiative for funding up to 3 approved respondents, receiving up to $500,000 each in federal home tenant-based rental assistance.
Okay, I need a motion, staff recommendation.
LaTosha Green Cobb, so moved.
Ray Dubuque, second.
Okay, I have a motion, second. LaTosha.
This is LaTosha Green Cobb. Do we have like a selection of counties that you're considering, or are you just going to wait until whatever comes in?
Yeah, we started with in the pilot, we started with counties with populations who were kind of the very rural counties, because really the focus, as the strategy says, the focus is really to kind of try to utilize our resources to help these homeless families in rural and smaller counties and smaller communities where maybe the resources and housing stock, that we finance aren't as available. And so then, as we received approval to expand, we decided work with stakeholders and doing some public workshopping and working with the Florida Department of Education to expand it to counties up to 4 400,000. So that's kind of our population. And then through this RFQ, it will be open, to any respondents from counties of up to 400,000 in population. And again, there has to be the application has to include that memorandum of understanding from those three key partners. And what we have found is what happens is then other community stakeholders become quickly involved in providing assistance. And as a side note, it's kind of what we were talking about yesterday with regarding home ownership. We don't kind of expect it to kind of happen for a lot of these families. We're really happy that they're out of homelessness and into permanent rental housing. But so far, I think we're now, as I heard last week, so far 4 of the families who went through the program are now successfully homeowners.
Wonderful.
And they're homeowners because of it was through the work of the local stakeholders, banks, accountants, folks working with these families to say, not to kind of rush into it, but that was their goal because they felt that would keep them from being homeless again or a better chance, and they had more control of the situation. But it was through a lot of education, a lot of looking at, what their risk would be or what it would be to be a homeowner before they kind of just went through the process. And now they have mentors and things in the community that kind of help them through these processes.
Yeah.
I've discussed it with staff before, and I hear the justification for focusing on the small rural counties, but I look forward to this being opened up statewide. In Broward County, there was a project called HEART, which was very similar to this. It was nationally recognized as being a best practice. Due to lack of funding from the feds, it went away, but the partnership is there, and I would love nothing more than to see this open up so that the HEART program can be revitalized once again. So keeping my fingers crossed. Next round we can expand it, but it's great to see that it's successful and it's growing.
Anything else? Okay, Sheila, would you pull the board, please?
Ron Lieberman?
Yes.
Ray Dubuque?
Yes.
Ryan Benson, were you able to get back on the call? He texted me that his call dropped. He didn't know whether he could get back in. Sandra Einhorn?
Yes.
Latasha Green Cobb?
Yes.
Bill Gulliford?
Yes.
Deb Motwani?
Yes.
Dane Eagle?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to open up the public comment.
Don, if you could open up the lines to anybody that wants to make a public comment, please.
Thank you. If you wish to ask a question, please key star and 1 on your telephone. Thank you. Just to remind you, to ask a question, please key star then 1 on your telephone. Thank you.
Wow.
So, Don, do we not have any comments?
There are no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any board member have anything?
Thank you for staff. Thank you for yesterday and looking forward. This is Sandra Einhorn. Thank you for yesterday and looking forward to a retreat later on this year. It was nice to hear from fellow board members on things that you all are passionate about and just to be able to converse with one another.
Ray?
Just a comment, it was nice to be with you on one more meeting. We go from meeting to meeting. I don't know whether I'm going to be here any longer, but it was nice to be here.
This rate will be a fun year.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I think we can adjourn.
All right. Thank you.